The worst guest we've ever had, because people used to ask me who the worst guest was.
Yes, always.
And I never had an answer, because you don't want to offend anyone.
Yes, of course.
But then I can now say it's Harvey Weinstein, because he was on the show.
Really? And was he a bad guest?
Apparently, yes.
For over 2 decades, Graham Norton has been the king of the chat show. He's a master of ceremonies, whose wit, warmth, and a perfectly timed sip of wine can pull the most outrageous stories from the world's biggest stars. The Graham Norton Show isn't just a talk show, it's a cultural phenomenon. It's a masterclass in chemistry where Hollywood legends, pop superstars, and comedy icons all pile onto one sofa for a night of pure entertainment. The format is genius. Part group therapy, part confessional, and part chaotic dinner party. The free-flowing conversation and the interactions between a seemingly random mix of stars create television magic. Graham has charmed hundreds, if not thousands, of the world's most famous people. He's seen it all, heard it all, and shared a laugh with almost everyone who is anyone. But what happens when the charm runs out? What happens when the carefully curated chaos of the show tips over into a genuine, uncomfortable disaster? What happens when a guest is just unbearable? For years, Graham has politely dodged the one question every interviewer asks. Who was your worst guest? He's been diplomatic, evasive, and ever the professional. But now, at 62 years old, he's finally starting to name names. He's pulling back the curtain on the moments that tested his patience, his professionalism, and his sanity. These aren't just slightly awkward interviews. These are the encounters that stand out for all the wrong reasons. The stories behind these on-screen train wrecks are more shocking and cringeworthy than you can imagine. From jaw-dropping rudeness and crippling anxiety to drunken chaos and something far more sinister. Today, we're counting down the 6 celebrity guests Graham Norton reportedly hated the most. Before we get to the Hall of Shame, you have to understand what makes the Graham Norton Show work. A bad guest isn't just a minor hiccup. They're like a poison that can curdle the entire atmosphere. The show's magic comes from the alchemy of the couch. Guests aren't interviewed one by one. They're all brought out together and encouraged to interact, listen, and build a rapport. A great guest gets this. They don't just show up to plug their latest movie. They come to be part of a shared experience. Graham has often praised the guests who just get it. He's talked about how stars like Taylor Swift, one of the most famous people on the planet, are lovely and normal and fantastic because they engage so genuinely. It's not about being the loudest person in the room. It's about being present and generous. A good guest tells a story, but a great guest listens to one too. So what makes a guest truly terrible? It's not always about diva behavior, though we'll definitely see some of that. A terrible guest can be a black hole of charisma, just sucking the energy from the room. They can be so self-absorbed they ignore everyone else on the couch. They might be so nervous they completely shut down, creating a void that even a host, as skilled as Graham, can't fill. Or they can be so disruptive they derail the entire show, turning a light-hearted chat into a hostage situation. The guests on this list cover the entire spectrum of chat show disasters. They are the ones who broke the unwritten rules of the big red couch, creating moments that weren't just bad TV, but were genuinely stressful for the host trying to manage it all live. Let's begin the countdown. Kicking off our list is a name. That might surprise you. He's not known for public meltdowns or a party boy reputation. He's a true Hollywood legend, an Oscar-winning director and actor behind classics like Dances with Wolves and The Bodyguard. When Kevin Costner sits on a talk show couch, you expect gravitas and thoughtful anecdotes. What you don't expect is for him to be, in Graham Norton's own words, snooty. Costner's spot on this list isn't because of one big, explosive moment. It was a quieter, more insidious kind of bad behavior, a dismissive attitude that soured his whole appearance. Norton has talked about the feeling that Costner simply did not want to be there, or at the very least didn't want to be talking to him. In a candid moment, Graham described the frustrating dynamic. I ask him a question and he looks at me like, Jesus, do I have to talk to this man? That's an absolute nightmare for any host. The heart of a chat show is the back and forth. When a guest treats you with visible disdain, the whole thing falls apart. It's no longer a fun chat. It's a chore the celebrity is begrudgingly getting through. What made it even worse was the contrast in how Costner treated his fellow guest, the equally legendary Dame Helen Mirren. Norton explained the frustrating situation. He kind of gives a half-an answer, and Helen Mirren chips in and asks him a question, and he could not be happier. That detail is incredibly telling. It suggests Costner's issue wasn't just a bad mood. It was a selective engagement, a clear preference for talking with a fellow A-lister over the man whose job it was to guide the conversation. That kind of behavior, intentional or not, comes across as deeply arrogant. It creates a hierarchy on the couch, separating the important people from the host. For a show that prides itself on its relaxed, conversational vibe, that's a fatal blow. And if you watch the clips, you can see what he means. While Costner does share stories, there's a stiffness to him, a lack of the joyful participation that defines the best Norton guests. Kevin Costner is the perfect entry point into the world of difficult guests. He wasn't a chaotic force of nature, but his snooty demeanor showed a fundamental misunderstanding, or maybe rejection, of what makes the show special. He wasn't there to be part of an ensemble. He was there as Kevin Costner, movie star, and he seemed to think that should be enough. Next up is an actor who built his career on being an unpredictable Hollywood wildcard, Mickey Rourke. Rourke's journey is the stuff of legend, a huge star in the 80s, a self-imposed exile into boxing, and a triumphant Oscar-nominated comeback with The Wrestler. When he's on a talk show, you're not just interviewing an actor, you're interviewing a life story full of grit and controversy that can either make for spectacular TV or a complete nightmare. With Rourke, it sounds like Graham got the nightmare. Norton was blunt about it, calling the interview not great and labeling Rourke as hard work. But the details paint a much clearer picture of just how challenging it was. The problem started before Rourke even made it to the couch. In one anecdote, Norton recalled being there when the actor arrived. I just happened to be standing there when he got out of the car, and he was holding a bottle of Jack Daniels, which is already no clear point or punchline. Graham said the other guests were leaning in, hoping for a classic Hollywood tale, but it just wasn't coming. The moment reached its painful climax when De Niro himself, lost in his own narrative, just gave up. He paused, looked at Graham, and asked the soul-crushing question, "Why am I telling this?" Nobody had an answer. The whole thing was so unsalvageable that it ended up on the cutting room floor, a rare move for a show that prides itself on feeling spontaneous. It was the ultimate proof of Norton's point. Here was one of the greatest actors alive, and yet he couldn't successfully tell a simple story about his own life. If you're enjoying this look behind the curtain of one of the world's most popular chat shows, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We've got 3 more shocking stories to go, and believe me, they only get worse from here. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. Our next guest takes us from the quietly boring to the loudly chaotic. In 2013, Mark Wahlberg sat on Graham Norton's couch, and what followed became one of the most famously awkward segments in the show's history. Unlike the quiet disdain of Kevin Costner or the silence of Robert De Niro, Wahlberg's offense was pure drunken disruption. He was a wrecking ball threatening to bring the whole show down. Wahlberg was on the couch alongside Michael Fassbender and Sarah Silverman. From the start, something was clearly off. While the show provides drinks, Wahlberg appeared to have arrived, as Norton would say, pre-liquored. The host later said that Wahlberg seemed fine at first, but the alcohol hit him hard about 20 minutes into the taping. And yeah, he did get very drunk, Norton stated bluntly. The result was TV anarchy. Wahlberg completely dominated the conversation, constantly interrupting the other guests. Every time Sarah Silverman or Michael Fassbender tried to tell a story, he would jump in with a bizarre comment. At one point, he slid over and started touching Sarah Silverman's leg. Later, in a moment of pure chaos, he got up and plopped himself down on Graham's lap, stroking his chest, while the host laughed uncomfortably. For Graham, it was a battle just to keep things on the rails. He later described the experience as annoying. "We couldn't get any stories going," he lamented. "A host's job is to make sure every guest gets a chance to shine. Wahlberg made that impossible. He sucked up all the airtime with his slurred jokes and restless energy." The discomfort of the other guests was obvious. Sarah Silverman, a seasoned pro, did her best to play along, but clearly struggled. The segment reached a strange and telling conclusion. Michael Fassbender finally managed to start a story, and to everyone's surprise, Wahlberg fell silent. Graham recalled thinking, "Wow, this must be a good story, because Mark Wahlberg's letting him tell it." But the reality was far more absurd. "And then I looked at Mark Wahlberg," Graham said, "and he was asleep." The disruptive guest had passed out. "We didn't wake him," Graham admitted. "We were delighted." Wahlberg later claimed his behavior was a pre-planned bit, but Norton's recollection of it being genuinely difficult and annoying suggests that if it was a joke, the host definitely wasn't in on it. The guest at number 2 presents a completely different kind of challenge. Her appearance wasn't marked by arrogance or intoxication. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Actress Daryl Hannah's interview was a disaster born not of malice, but of what seemed to be crippling, paralyzing fear. It's a story that makes you feel some sympathy, but from a TV production standpoint, it was a catastrophe. Daryl Hannah, star of films like Splash and Kill Bill, appeared on an early version of Graham's show, v. Graham Norton, back in 2003. She was the only guest, meaning the entire episode rested on her shoulders. Unfortunately, she was in no state to carry it. Norton revealed that Hannah is terrified of a studio audience. He explained the paradox. Weirdly, she can do a play, but she's terrified of a studio audience. Being herself in front of a studio audience makes her terrified. This fear completely derailed the interview. Graham has called it one of the most excruciating experiences of his career, characterized by one-word answers and long, agonizing silences. He was completely stranded, struggling to get anything from her. "She just sat there saying nothing," he recalled. The production team had warned him about her anxiety, even telling him a rumor that she once fainted during an attempt to appear on David Letterman's show. For a host whose whole style is built on quick-witted banter, a silent guest is the ultimate roadblock. There's nothing to work with. In the end, the interview was, in Norton's own words, a very poor show. It was a complete failure. But what makes this story unique is Graham's reaction. He doesn't seem to hold any grudge against Hannah. In fact, he expressed admiration for her courage in even trying. "So she did our show, and bless her, she wasn't a great guest," he said. "But what I loved was, because she got through it, afterwards, she was high as a kite. She really felt like she'd done an amazing thing." This adds a layer of complexity. While guests like Wahlberg were difficult because of their actions, Hannah was difficult because of her inaction, driven by profound anxiety. Norton was thrilled for her personally that she'd faced her fear, but professionally, the interview was a write-off. He admitted he probably wouldn't have her back, but he was glad she did it for her own sake. We've arrived at the number 1 spot. The person who, in Graham Norton's own words, gets the prize for the worst guest ever. This isn't about being boring, drunk, or anxious. This is about something far darker. The guest who holds this dubious honor is the disgraced and convicted film producer, Harvey Weinstein. Weinstein appeared on the show in 2015, alongside David Tennant, Olivia Colman, and Jessie J. This was before the 2017 revelations exposed him as a predator and sent shockwaves through the world. At the time, he was just a powerful movie mogul. But even then, Graham knew something was deeply wrong. The problems started before the cameras were even rolling. It turns out, Weinstein had bullied his way onto the show. Norton recounted how the producer first emailed him with a compliment, but then the demand started. And then he decided he wanted to be on the show, Graham explained. The show was already fully booked. Weinstein's response was to push back relentlessly, sending a barrage of emails and refusing to take no for an answer. The persistence was so aggressive that Graham eventually had to hand it off to his booker. At the time, Norton rationalized it. "I thought that sort of attitude." "Oh no, I'm going on. That is what makes you a very good producer," he said. But in retrospect, knowing what we know now, that same behavior took on a horrifying new meaning. But of course, now that we know what we know, that is what makes him a predator, Norton reflected. It was that kind of weird tunnel vision thing. And it was sort of chilling in retrospect because I was just laughing at those emails. But you realize, oh my God, that is an insight into how that man is. On set, Weinstein's presence was just as unsettling. He dominated the conversation with an air of arrogance, steering every topic back to his own accomplishments. Graham, who can usually find humor in anything, appeared visibly strained. This is what makes Harvey Weinstein the undisputed worst guest. It goes beyond a single bad night of television. Robert De Niro was boring, and Mark Wahlberg was drunk. Their appearances were professionally difficult, but Weinstein's was morally repulsive in hindsight. The creepy vibe and aggressive, entitled behavior that Norton experienced weren't just the quirks of a difficult personality. They were the warning signs of a predator hiding in plain sight. For Graham, who works to create a space of fun and respect, sharing his couch with such a man, even unknowingly, was a profound violation. So there you have it. From the snooty to the silent, the drunk to the terrified, and finally, to the truly predatory. 6 vastly different celebrities who all earned the unwanted distinction of being one of Graham Norton's worst guests. Their stories pull back the curtain on the world of celebrity talk shows, proving it's not all glamour and witty banter. It's a high-wire act that requires immense skill and patience. For every dozen guests like Tom Hanks who come ready to play, there's a Kevin Costner who looks down on the host, or a Mark Wahlberg who falls asleep on the job. These 6 encounters truly highlight the incredible talent of Graham Norton. He's more than just a host with a good sense of humor. He's a master conductor, a social navigator, and a professional firefighter, all rolled into one. He has the immense task of making it all look effortless, even when a guest is giving him nothing, making a scene, or, in the worst case, revealing a glimpse of a truly dark character. It shows that a great chat show is a delicate dance, and it only takes one person stepping on everyone's toes to bring the whole thing to an awkward halt. What do you think? Who do you believe is the worst talk show guest of all time? Was there anyone we missed from this list? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the best and worst moments of television, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We'll see you in the next one.